Hej allihopa! Gud vad kul! Klockan har slagit 5 och vi ska köra igång vårt andra avsnitt, Malin.
Ja.
Jättetack till dig som är med oss live här ikväll. Känns jättekul och det ger mig lite extra energi att veta att vi är tillsammans. Att det händer nu så att säga. Och ni är många ska ni veta. Och vi har också internationella lyssnare och tittare idag. Alla länder där OsteoStrong finns idag. Vi pratar Grekland, Norge, Danmark, Australien, USA då självklart har bjudits in till detta. För vi har ju en internationell gäst idag. Så vi kommer ju så småningom att gå över till engelska språket. So for all you international listeners, we will in 10 minutes move over to the English language and introduce John, because this episode is mostly about the interview with him and about Spectrum and OsteoStrong. Så att vi kommer släppa på John. Det är ju mannen som har byggt maskinerna. Tack vare honom som vi kan bedriva en verksamhet och idag förändra människors liv inifrån.
Verkligen.
Det kan vara så att du sitter och lyssnar på det här nu och aldrig har besökt ett OsteoStrong center. Du kanske har fått ett tips eller sett oss på Facebook och sitter och lyssnar nu. Så vi tänker att vi börjar alldeles strax med en kort intro bara vad vi gör och hur det går till. Och sen kommer ju hela timmen handla om detta tillsammans med John då. Det ska bli jättespännande. Det här är vårt andra poddavsnitt. Det här är ju något som vi gör nu för att addera värde till dig som medlem hos oss framförallt. Men också en möjlighet att fortsätta utbilda i det här fallet Sverige på området benskörhet. Och vi kan ju dela med oss vad vi kan, men det finns ju så mycket mer man kan göra på det här området. Och Malin som sitter bredvid mig nu är ju materialtekniker, du har doktorerat inom ortopedi, skrivit ett 50-tal vetenskapligt publicerade studier och artiklar. Och det är inte slut där, det är mycket på gång. Och du är medicinskt ansvarig för oss. Du var senast idag på möte hos Karolinska i den planeringen kring den studien vi vill göra.
Just det. Ska jag nämna lite om studien?
Ska vi börja där direkt? Ja. Jag vill gärna höra, så varför inte? Jag tror att våra medlemmar vill också höra. Ja. Så ge oss det senaste, vad har hänt där?
Ja, vi jobbar ju nu på att sätta ihop protokollet för den här studien. Det är väldigt många frågor som ska besvaras. Så att vi har veckovisa möten. Vi ses ju inte då fysiskt såklart, utan det är alltid digitalt. Det är viktigt för oss att vi får ihop den här planeringen, rätar ut alla frågetecken kring vilka olika tester vi ska göra och hur många som ska vara med. Och vi har ju vår OsteoStrong-grupp såklart, men det ska ju finnas en grupp som man jämför sig mot och de ska ju träna med fysioterapeut och det är mycket frågor kring det, hur ska man lösa det? Men vi jobbar nu med protokollet och kommer då i maj månad att skicka in något som heter etiskt kommittégodkännande. Så den etiska kommittén är tvungen att godkänna det här såklart. Ja. Annars hamnar vi i Macchiarini-fallet, det vill vi inte. Utan man vill verkligen ha etiska kommitténs godkännande för att det här är en etiskt försvarbar studie och att vi då ska kunna visa att vi har en OsteoStrong-grupp som i jämförelse med vanlig träning med en sjukgymnast. Helst ska vi visa att OsteoStrong-gruppen har bättre resultat såklart än vad man får nu i den traditionella träningen.
Jag minns att jag frågade dig hur säker du var på att du skulle visa det. Ja. Just det. Och då svarade du 100%.
Ja.
Så det
jag är fortfarande 100% säker på det. Men det ska bli jättespännande och vi kommer att starta nästa år med den här studien. Så ni kommer få höra om det här under lång tid framöver. Viktigt att komma ihåg för er som känner att jag skulle vilja vara med. För det första kommer man inte få välja om man vill vara med i OsteoStrong-gruppen eller den andra gruppen. Och för det andra kan man inte börja redan träna hos OsteoStrong. För att då är man redan dopad, eller vad man ska säga. Utan man måste börja från noll.
Okay.
Men
så våra medlemmar är diskvalificerade?
Ja, precis. Så är det. Men de kan ju bjuda in någon kompis. som de känner skulle vilja vara med. Och då blir den kompisen i sådana fall lottad till den ena eller den andra gruppen.
Just det, så man kan inte veta att man får vara hos oss.
Nej.
Man kan ha otur och hamna i en annan
Ja,
grupp.
precis.
Ja, det här ska
Så
bli
kan
så
det vara.
spännande. Tack Malin, gud vad spännande. Ni som tittar nu under den här timmen live, ni kan ju ställa frågor till oss och då använder ni chattfunktionen. Skriv in där, vi har Robert bakom kameran här som tar del av dem. Han kommer svara på en del skriftligen och sen kanske vi lyfter upp en eller två tillsammans med John.
Ja.
Och vi svarar på dem i efterhand om det skulle vara så att vi inte tar med dem här. Så det är ett bra tips. För de nu som inte har en aning om vad vi gör, de har bara fått höra om någon studie och någon John som ska prata här strax. Vad kan vi säga till dem lite kort så att de förstår vad vi gör? Vad gör OsteoStrong? Vill du börja Malin att nämna någonting om vad det är vi kan hjälpa till med?
Just det som är speciellt hos OsteoStrong det är att vi här kan belasta skelettet på ett sätt som är helt unikt. Vi kan alltså försätta kroppen i en situation där skelettet belastats säkert med sin egen muskelkraft i 4 maskiner där alla inställningar är kontrollerade och man får liksom allting individuellt anpassat så att man ställer in maskinen efter sin egen längd och så. Men sen trycker man med sin egen muskelkraft mot ett motstånd som är stumt så ingenting rör sig och även om man har ledsmärtor så är det inga problem att göra den här belastningen eftersom man inte har någon rörelse då. Och i och med den här tunga belastningen så får man bencellerna i skelettet att aktiveras på ett sätt som de inte blir aktiverade i vardaglig rörelse eller verksamhet eller vad man säger. Man går promenader så kommer man att aktivera skelettet på ett visst sätt. Men i de här maskinerna är det ungefär som att skjuta igång en bil. Man tar i ordentligt och de här bencellerna får en skjuts och börjar bygga starkare skelett.
Ja. Och när vi presenterar det här på Odenplans läkarhus till exempel, då tar det oss en dryg timme att gå igenom det här noggrant. Så att, vi rekommenderar er alla att kontakta oss för mer information. Det kommer komma ut mejl till er som lyssnar idag också med möjlighet att titta på en sån föreläsning med oss. Så att ni kommer få i lugn och ro kunna ta till er all den här informationen. Det man kan säga mer om OsteoStrong är ju att man kommer in en gång i veckan. Det gillar våra medlemmar att det tar inte så mycket tid av ens vardag. Alla har vi begränsat oftast med tid och energi. Det är ett kort besök på 20 minuter nu en gång i veckan som ger de här resultaten. Man har alltid en instruktör som instruerar och ser till att det blir säkert och riktigt. Extra viktigt när vi har att göra med många som är bensköra och har ont i kroppen. Att det här går till på rätt sätt då.
Ja, just det. Det finns ingen begränsning egentligen i hur skör man kan vara utan man utgår hela tiden från sin egen fysiska förmåga där man har idag. Och är man väldigt skör, vi har ju många medlemmar som har varit väldigt sköra när de har kommit första gången, då ser man till att man hjälper medlemmen att ta i utifrån den fysiska möjligheten man har just vid det tillfället. Och sen kan man ju långsamt och successivt öka på belastningen såklart. Men det finns ingen begränsning i hur skön man kan vara när man börjar.
Nej, så att vi har verkligen alla nivåer av medlemmar här fysiskt. Då. Vår äldsta medlem fyller 100 år i år.
Ja.
Hon skickade en bild till oss förra veckan. Så otroligt härlig energi. Tänk att snart fylla 100 och fortfarande investera i sin hälsa och vilja bli starkare, piggare och orka mera. Det är ett föredöme för de som känner att de inte har tid eller ork eller på något sätt har gett upp. Ja. Bra, tack Malin. Förra veckan hade vi Staffan med oss. Titta gärna på det avsnittet också. Där pratar vi om vibrationsterapi och vad det gör för kropp och muskler, senor, leder, nervsystem. Det var helt fantastiskt. Och det finns mycket att titta in i ännu mer. Vi har många av våra medlemmar som har kommit tillbaka efter det avsnittet, kommit in och ställt massa intressanta följdfrågor och investerat i tekniken på egen hand och liknande. Och vi påminner också om att vi har de här massagepistolerna inne i centrum nu för er att prova på. De är här för er att testa. De är fantastiska. Jag tror det är dags. Ja. Eller hur? Det är dags för våran gäst. John, han har nyligen klivit upp ur sängen, tror jag. Klockan är strax efter 8 på morgonen. Och han är med på länk nu då. John har då tagit fram de här maskinerna. Han ska få berätta själv om hur han tänkte där och var han fick idén ifrån och hur det här gick till. Men det är bra att veta vem han är. Han är ju då även forskare, författare idag till böcker inom hälsa, kost, en inspiratör och föreläsare och är på väg att bli en av världens mest inflytelserika inom fitness och träning. Så det är inte vem som helst som vi har med oss här idag och hans tid är begränsad. John! He's on mute.
Unmute yourself.
You guys keep muting me.
Yes. John, I just introduced you to the listeners and viewers in Swedish.
I thought that's what you were doing. It sounded like my name here and there.
I was polite and I told them a little bit about your background. First of all, thank you for joining us. I know your time is
Absolutely.
precious. A lot of people want to get a piece of you. Good. And so to have you here live is very much appreciated. And I know I'm talking from our members as well. Please tell us a little bit about you in short terms. Who are you?
Well, I developed the devices for OsteoStrong, the Spectrum devices, originally to treat my mother's osteoporosis. So she had low bone density, and it's a pretty simple story. I decided I was going to go look for people who had a above normal response with their bone density, the people with the highest bone density in the world. And they were really easy to find. There's a lot of research on them. It's gymnasts. And it had to do with the rate at which they contact the ground and the velocity with regard to their body weight and the momentum. So they would get sometimes 10 or even 20 times their body weight through their musculoskeletal system, particularly in the hip joint, which is where we have the worst osteoporotic fractures. So when I looked at all this data that was readily available, like I said, lots of studies on high impact in gymnastics.
How many?
Say it again?
How many studies have you been reading?
Hundreds. There were hundreds of them.
Okay.
Yeah. And so the question was, gymnastics is dangerous because with impact comes injury. And there's a reason gymnasts retire at an average of 19 years of age. So they get a lot of injuries, though they have very high levels of bone density. So the question I asked was, how do I get the benefit of the high impact without the risks of injury of the high impact? So wanted to create a system that emulated the high impact without the risks. Okay. And that's what we got. Can
you pause there? I will just translate some in Swedish and then you can move on.
Yes.
Så det John säger här är att han fick idén och motivationen när hans mor diagnostiserades med osteoporos. Då var hon 60-årsåldern, vilket är lite väl tidigt. Och att han sen då i forskning fann hundratals studier som visade vilka på våran jord idag som har starkast benstomme och som på egen hand på ett naturligt sätt, icke-medicinskt, och stärker det. Och det var gymnaster, elitgymnaster och atleter som möter impact i någon form. Även friidrottare och liknande. Och det han säger är också att det här skulle inte vara säkert för hans mor. Han hade inte kunnat anmäla henne till Brommagymnasterna. Utan där insåg han att jag behöver kunna applicera den här kraften på min mamma, men på ett säkert sätt. Jättespännande. Okay, John, thank you. Continue.
So I ended up building a prototype of the devices to test with myself and my mother and my father.
How was that?
Family.
Was she positive, or did she trust you, or did you?
No, she did not trust me. Of course not. No, she was very, very angry. Did not like it at all. But very quickly, she started to get a lot stronger. And so, like, she would carry like 20-kilo bags of soil in the garden. She did gardening, and so she could never do that before, and because she would always ask me to do it, and so
that's why I built the machine.
Yeah, because I didn't want to carry those bags of soil. It's right. So she started doing that, and so she could tell there was a big difference. Also, her shoulders started to move back. She improved her posture. So there were very quick benefits that were seen physiologically, and then within 18 months, she had the bones of a 30-year-old. So she had completely reversed her osteoporosis, and like she was back to healthy bone and healthier, much healthier. Considering her age, she was in her 70s.
Wow. And how often did she do this prototype training?
Just one time per week, because we had the research early on that suggested the metabolic rate of bone is very different than the metabolic rate of muscle, than the metabolic rate of cardiovascular tissue. Your lungs and your heart recover very quickly. Muscle takes 36 hours to recover from like a heavy weight training type workout, but bone takes 5 to 10 days. So 7 days was perfect.
Okay. And you say that you treated your mother's osteoporosis. Did you do before and after DEXAs and how?
Yes.
How did that?
Yeah. That's so. She was right at the diagnosis level for a long time. She was still very active when she was diagnosed. So she hiked. She would hike for 10 miles, like in a day. Like she would just very, very active, played tennis, gardening, never afraid of physical activity. And she's also kind of a smaller person. So of course the smaller people have more fragility fractures because the girth of bone, the thickness. So when you pinch like your radius here, some people have a different thickness, right? So, and this is why different races of people have different likelihood of fractures. So like Caucasians have a certain rate, Asians are a little bit worse. But like people of African descent, and the highest thickness of bone density is Pacific Islanders, like Tongans and Samoans. So even if they lose bone density, the bone is thicker. So they're less likely to fracture just because of the thickness of bone, which is why we separate out the different races of people when we do the analysis.
So that is one of the reasons why us living up north see more fractures than people closer to
right. Also, that anywhere where you're standing on ice, there's more fragility fractures.
True.
Sorry. Yeah. Ice and bone don't get along very well.
True. But we haven't had that much ice in Stockholm this year.
This year was a good osteoporotic year.
Well,
that's good.
When John visited us, when we opened OsteoStrong in 2018, we took him swimming in ice. It was in February.
Yes, and you told me all the Swedes do this. All of them. So we go out to the water, nobody's there.
Yeah, that's true. It was just 7 o'clock in the morning. That's a beautiful memory of mine. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I kept asking you, where's all of the Swedish people? You said they'd all be here.
They came right after. Yeah. Okay. So, but tell us a little bit about your background. Where did this confidence come from that you thought that you can build this device, and what is your background on this area? And
it came in very slowly because I decided to do this before I had any medical training at all.
Yeah.
So I did my PhD as I was developing it, and my PhD is in biomedical engineering. So as I developed it, I wrote to a lot of different universities like, hey, I want to do a PhD program, except I don't want to be assigned a project, because when you go into a PhD program, they assign you something that you might be interested in or you might not be interested in. It's just not really up to you. So I said, no, I want to study my own thing, and I want to write all my dissertation work on my development. Finally, I got a university that would agree to that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I did it. So that was a great experience, but I really came at this from a fresh perspective. And my PhD advisor told me if I had done my education first and then come up with this idea, that I would have talked myself out of it.
Yeah.
Because it's so different. It's just completely the opposite of the way the world had looked at bone. And even some of the experts at the top people in bone density research, which I see every year that I go to the World Congress on Osteoporosis. I didn't go last year, but I've been 4 previous years. And they would say to me, we've always been looking for the growth factors, the biochemical changes that happen when high impact activity happens to the bone, so we can isolate them, synthesize them, and turn them into a drug. And of course, my question was, why? The body does it already.
Yeah.
Like, we don't need a drug for eyesight if you already have eyesight. We don't need a drug for normal bowel movements if you have normal bowel movements. So, like, why don't we just use the body's own mechanical processes? Okay. And, they looked at me like, well, okay, yeah, what you did works. So, yeah, I guess that works too. But that's not where the industry was going, because it never. And here's the funniest thing: they said we can't get people. And this is Professor Ego Seaman told me this, and he's like one of the absolute top guys. He's a professor at I think University of Australia in Melbourne, and also a very, very fun, exciting researcher, which isn't always a feature with researchers, being fun and exciting. So what he said to me was, we can hardly get people to take a pill every day. Like, they won't remember to do that, or they don't want to because they feel the side effects. He said, I'm afraid you won't get people to do this. And I said, but it actually feels great. So they will do it, because everyone who comes into an OsteoStrong feels fantastic for a whole week afterward. And then they want to keep coming because it's just totally invigorating. It's high energy. It's a positive environment. Everybody you see around you is getting better results. That number every time is what I believe will be the ultimate measure of bone health, not DEXA scan, because what matters most when we look at bone? Is it an x-ray? Is it a picture of bone? Is that going to keep us safe? Or is it the actual functional performance of the bone? Because that's what we're getting every time when we go to OsteoStrong. We get to see a functional number as to the performance of the bone when it's under high tension.
That's
interesting. And it's safe. Right. So like the functional performance test of bone, like look at what a cardiologist does. A cardiologist will take your blood pressure. We'll put a blood pressure cuff on you and measure your blood pressure. But they don't really care about that much, because that's just like what your blood pressure is when you're just sitting there. They put you on a treadmill and they see, your blood pressure go up and your blood pressure go down, and so they monitor the performance of how the heart behaves. Yep. That's a dynamic test. A dynamic test is always superior to a static test. Mm-hmm. So what's the dynamic test for bone? It's OsteoStrong.
Okay. John, please, a lot of the viewers today, they don't know the science you do. Just tell them, what is happening in the body when you go through an OsteoStrong session? Just briefly, what is the basics?
So if you imagine a bone right here, the bone gets compressed from end to end. So a bone structurally is a lot like a straw.
Yeah.
Everybody know what a straw is? I mean, is that the right word? Yeah.
Sugrör in Swedish.
Yeah. Yeah. So like the material's on the outside and there's really not much in the middle. Like that's what you call spongy bone. There's not a lot of structure in there. So a straw you can bend very easily, but if you put pressure on it, the shearing effect within the walls of the bone is distributed, and that way you're leveraging the maximum amount of power that can be put through the bone. Well, that slightly deforms the bone and compresses the bone, but also you're leveraging it when it's most powerful. So those two things are happening at the same time. So you deform the most powerful cells in the bone as opposed to the weakest cells, and then you get a growth effect because those loads are very similar to the high impact type forces. Every position that you load in at OsteoStrong is an impact ready position.
Yeah.
So that's where I picked those positions. They were the positions that a human would normally absorb high impact forces. Mm-hmm. So we isolate those positions with the fine adjustment, the robotic arm, get people in exactly the right position to do it, and then allow them to self-compress. So it's their own comfort that is the guide to how much force they can put through the bone. They slightly deform the bone, and then as soon as the bone becomes deformed and then springs back into position, then all of the cells are stimulated to pull in more minerals, calcium, but there's 19 other minerals. And so all that material gets pulled into the bone, and the bone starts to build more tiny little walls inside of the bone to increase the density of the structure. The density of the bone matrix is what it's called.
Do Dr. Malin agree on this?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. Good. And I get a lot of questions in the center when they come in at first. How can this be safe? I mean, I'm fragile, and you're talking about compressing my bones. Isn't this?
Can I break the bone?
Can I break a bone at OsteoStrong?
Right. So there's a reason we emulate high impact instead of engage in high impact. So the difference is as we define it, because this is really our definition. Yeah. Emulation can mean a lot of things. But so I'm going to get in a position where I'm right about here, 120-degree angle from upper to lower arm, and I'm going to be able to either produce or absorb the most amount of force in this exact position. But because nothing is abrupt, because we slowly load the system, we use a process called neural inhibition, which is within your own body. And that neural inhibitory process dictates that when you become uncomfortable, when you are nearing a potential injury, muscles start to shut off and will not let you continue. Sort of like if you're running and you lose your balance, the second you lose your balance, you slow down.
Yeah.
You used to play soccer.
Yeah.
Football. Yeah. When someone would bump into you and you were off balance, could you run full speed? No way.
No.
Yeah, you'd lose your speed. So that's a part of the game. So when that's the same type of thing. So loss of balance, perception of pain, potentially nearing a fracture, your body will shut itself off. So
what you mean is when a member is in the machine, start to push or pull, do it slowly, the body will on itself shut down if it's going to be too heavy for the bones. That's
right.
Okay.
Right, and because of the slow nature of the loading. Now, sometimes people get into position and they do that, and they try and engage in a high impact manner. This is always men who do this. Women never do this. We can have a psychologist look into that at some point. But that is an incorrect use. That's bad.
Yeah.
So you don't want somebody to slam into the movements. They need to be very slow and very controlled as they go in and out of the movements. And the software the software is designed to encourage very slow and controlled behavior.
And how does the screen tell you that? How is it designed to do that?
We engineered a delay.
Yeah.
So, right. So it's actually about like 0.3 of a second slower to report what you're doing versus what output you're creating. So it makes people hesitate a little bit, and they slow down so that the feedback on the screen matches what they're doing.
Okay. It's all about safety.
Most people would call that an error, but we created an error so that people would behave in the right way.
And make you made the process safer by doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And safety is the number one.
Yes.
For us.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and there are still people who get some compression. Like, there's a risk to anything. Any athletic thing you do, any physical thing you do, there's risk.
Of course.
Right. So people need to be made aware of that. But this is a very low risk by compared to other types of activity, and then the reward is very high.
Yeah. Another common question for me or everybody working in an OsteoStrong center is, but why can't I do this at my gym? I still lift heavy load. I still do bench press and all this. I don't need OsteoStrong. What's your opinion there?
There are millions of people around the world who lift weights and still get osteoporosis. And the problem is weightlifting, let's talk about the hip joint. That's the most important joint because it is where the fractures happen that contribute most to early death. So it's because of the complications, like you get pneumonia because you can't move around, that kind of thing, or you can't heal up from the fracture because instead of a clean break, the bone shatters. So when you look at the averages, now I'll talk about Americans because I have that data in my head, but American people who exercise, when they begin, they typically load the lower extremities with 1.3 times their body weight. And the more advanced people at weightlifting use 1.53 times their body weight through their hip joint. So the problem with that is the minimum dosage of force that goes through the hip to trigger bone growth is 4.2 multiples of body weight. So if advanced lifters are using 1.5 times their body weight, but the minimum dosage is 4 times your body weight, you're not doing anything. You might be doing something for muscle, but you're not doing anything for bone. So the loading just isn't high enough.
How do we know?
Say it again?
Sorry, how do we know that it's 4.2? How do we know that?
So there's been a number of studies. Some of them were out of Finland. Some of the Finland and the United Kingdom have really been studying this with great diligence. So we know, and they came to the same answer with completely different approaches, which I appreciate. But using accelerometers and looking at people's activity, they can determine that the people that exceed 4.2 multiples of body weight through high impact are growing bone. The people who fail to exceed 4.2 multiples of body weight are not growing bone.
Ja. Så 4,2 gånger vår egen kroppsvikt. Där går minimigränsen för att stärka och liksom få en osteoblast ökning, aktivitet i kroppen.
Ja, i höften.
I höften. Okej. This is super interesting, John. Really. What results? I mean, we know about your mother, but what results have you seen OsteoStrong bringing to their users more than increases of bone? Because we have our own members that's been here now for 2 years that just recently got new DEXA scan, and they no longer need any drugs, and they are healthy in their bones. So we know that this works, but there are so many members coming into us today that they don't have osteoporosis, they don't even close right now, and they still invest in this. And why are they correct in that investment, would you say?
So they can build bone density beyond normal levels, because when you build bone density with osteogenic loading, like what we do with Spectrum devices at OsteoStrong, the bone lasts within your body 30 years. And there's a bit of research on that. So you're going to be doing better for a long period of time based on what you do at OsteoStrong. Now, they also get an amount of strength and activation of musculature, which can be protective from injury, but also just a performance benefit that they would not get from weightlifting. Also some postural changes.
Yeah.
So one of the things that determines how old someone looks is their posture. So people end up looking younger when they come in to OsteoStrong because their posture changes. So that's a tremendous benefit, especially for women who become kyphotic, their shoulders come forward younger than men typically do. And so they can reverse that process and end up being a lot happier because of it. So that's a quality of life thing that you're just not going to get anywhere else.
It really is. I can really be a witness to that. I see our members all day long here and how they reshape their bodies and just switch their attitude to life. It's life quality, life changing. Mm-hmm. We actually have one member that is through her last DEXA scan shown that she is taller. Her spine has straightened up, so she's taller now than the last scan.
She didn't actually grow. She just has better posture. Right.
Of course not.
Right.
But the spine is, and her posture is so much better. That's amazing. Balance. A lot of members come into us and have poor balance. And I would say that balance is one of the quickest results we see in here at OsteoStrong.
Very quick.
Did you know when you built this device and this system that balance would be also very much?
I did, but I didn't know it was going to be that powerful for balance. Ultimately, one of the reasons we lose balance is because we lose the ability to activate muscle, both stabilization muscles, which are clearly very important in balance, but the primary movement muscles, just like the quadriceps. So people lose the ability to just even activate these muscles. They can't even turn them on when they become a little deconditioned or just inactive. And so they're not even able to use the muscle they have. So very quickly, we start to activate these muscles and balance comes back as quickly.
We see results on balance after their first visit sometimes after 2, 3, it's just so much better. So that is also a life-changing experience for all members, and the risk of ending up with a fracture.
Decreases if you have better balance, and then the risk of falling is lower, of course. So that's double plus.
Yeah, this is something I love about OsteoStrong compared to medicine. If you take a tablet or pill, you might get help with your bone density, but you won't get better balance or you want to get stronger muscles or better posture. So this is something I really like. It's a natural adaptive response in your body, and it gives you so many benefits, except the increase of bone density, which is in itself is just fantastic. So it's really strengthening the whole system that protects us from fractures.
Yeah, I have a question regarding another thing. We have a lot of members saying that they feel they have more energy and they feel like happier. Why is that when they just charging their skeleton? Why do they feel happier and with more energy?
Well, there's some things we know, and then there's some other theories that so physiologically, when the shoulders move back and your posture improves, like, you know, you like most people when they're past 50 years old, the center of their shoulder is in front of their ear, right?
Yeah.
But as you do OsteoStrong, your shoulders sit further back. So when now you guys are all self-conscious and you both sit up straight, that's really funny. I'm talking about neutral when you're not thinking about it, not when you're sitting in the chair. But that was really funny. So when that happens, the rib cage opens and your lungs have more room to expand. So that's just a mechanical thing. But of course, if you're processing more oxygen, you're going to feel more energy. You're going to be more awake when you're awake. And yeah, so that's something we know. Now, there's another thing that is much more, is much harder to measure. Sorry, my allergies are really bothering me. Don't come to California right now.
No.
I'm allergic to everything. Yeah, it's the spring. Spring's almost over, so it just only bothers me during the spring. So when people engage with OsteoStrong, they see changes very quickly, and a lot of people that use OsteoStrong, maybe they haven't had a big background with exercise in their life, and so their health is a subject of frustration. And so Basil Hunt, I don't know if you've had him on your show, but if you haven't, you should.
Yeah.
What he determined in one of the studies we did in London was he looked at the confidence of the people in the subject of their health. So what was their outlook on their health? And in the beginning of the study, they all felt like their health was something that was out of control and a very frustrating subject. At the end of the study, they felt like they had complete control over their health.
Yeah.
So what happens, and this is subconscious, you can't just tell yourself, I'm going to be happier about my health. There has to be a reason that your subconscious is changing. And so what people determine is when this happens and they start to control their bone health, now they say, well, maybe I'll take my nutrition a little more seriously than I ever have before. And they make a nutrition change and they lose some body fat. And maybe they start eating more red meat. And so when you eat a lot of red meat, your gray hair turns back to its normal color. A lot of people don't know that. So they start eating more meat and, you know, their gray hair goes away. So now they have better posture and they look younger and they end up feeling fantastic. So it becomes a chain reaction of things.
I think you're absolutely right. I think one thing leads to another. And I often meet members when they come in at our location for the first time. They are worried, sometimes scared, they are hurt, they are in pain. They have been to many doctors, they tried many medicines, and they have almost given up. And that is not a positive, energetic state. And after 3-4 months with OsteoStrong, they start to see positive changes in their physical health for the first time in 25 years. Of
Right.
course, it will give you.
And most people are fear-based decision makers. Look at with this coronavirus. Your country was the only country that did this correctly and decided we're going to just have healthy people like fight the virus, and then we're going to have herd immunity. Brilliant. Only smart approach on earth. Everyone else totally screwed this up and made decisions based on fear and decided everybody needs to hide, yet that doesn't solve the problem. It just prolongs the problem. So, like, why not just make everybody healthy? Why not tell the fat people they're fat and they got to just address it? Now's the time, because this disease is killing more overweight people than anybody else. So, you know, time to look at that. So, you know, like it's very difficult to make non-fear-based decisions. So OsteoStrong gets people thinking about the positive things going on in their body as opposed to the negative things.
This is super interesting because Malin will soon come into the study that is gonna happen here in Sweden, and there will be many things measured in that one. And I know one of the things that we want to look at is how they feel, the level of happiness and joy in their life before the study started and afterwards. So that is very promising that you have already shown that in the latest study in London. So that is beautiful.
Yeah.
Many of our members ask me, but Jonas, why can I just come in once a week and only 10 seconds of actual force? Can you just comment briefly on why once a week is enough and the limited time is enough?
So there's a 2015 study done with different radiation analysis. So more in depth than X-ray, because an X-ray is a radiation test.
Yeah.
Looking at bone, but very detailed look at how bone behaves when an osteogenic triggering event happens. And so this is, by the way, for those of you who like to read research, it's NIE 2015. It's out of a Canadian university. Can't remember exactly, but it had to do, the title was something about nuclear tests of bone density. This is the most complicated study I think has ever been written, ever. It took me like a week to just figure out what they were talking about in this study.
How many studies have you written or read?
Say it again?
How many studies have you been reading, do you think, on this subject?
I've read thousands and thousands of studies. And this one is like, I hand it to other professors who do bone density research, and they flip through it and just start laughing. So I can't even tell what this is about. It's not an easy study. It's like very complicated. You really have to understand how radiation works and how radiation interacts with different materials and can show us properties of different materials that we wouldn't otherwise be able to see or analyze. So that's part of the thing. Like, radiation behavior was not my field. So I really had to like spend a week learning about that before I could even read the study. That was the comical part. And I met some of the researchers that were on that team, and they laugh about the study too, because they knew when they were writing it, no one's going to be able to understand this. So, but the most important part was that they determined, and this is fascinating about bone as a tissue, primary mineralization happens between 5 and 10 days. That's the study that determined that. Now, we knew the metabolic rate of bone was longer because it just takes longer to either grow or atrophy. So we've known that for years. Like, people hit peak bone mass and it slowly atrophy at 30 years old. But are they really engaging in high impact activity at 30 years old? No. That was maybe 19 years old, where the last time they absorbed the highest impacts. So why would it stop at 30? And it's because there is a lag in the body response. So 5 to 10 days primary mineralization. Secondary mineralization is 130 days.
Wow.
Yeah. And then there might even be like a third that they theorized about that could take months or even a year to fully respond. So what happens in bone happens slowly.
So you mean that one triggering event can have a wave?
Can have a positive effect for a long time. And like I said, we also know from other studies, not this one, but we know from other studies that when you build bone density through high impact type stimuli, you keep it for 30 years. So like when you build a muscle through exercise, you don't keep that for 30 years. In fact, detraining effects take hold in 10 days after you stop exercising.
Yeah.
So if you do like weightlifting exercise or other things to trigger muscular growth, if you stop doing that within 10 days, the muscle starts to shrink. So very different metabolic rate. Fascinating. What bone, like how powerful bone is, and how long it takes to respond, and how long you retain those minerals. And of course, calcium is needed for every interaction of the central nervous system. Every time an axon and a dendrite communicate, calcium is used. So not only is bone the structure of our body, but it's also the battery for what our central nervous system needs for that fuel. So the more of that you have, are we optimizing our central nervous system? Hard to say. There's not really studies done on central nervous system behavior with people with higher bone density versus lower bone density. I've been looking for that. There's nothing out there yet. But I'd love to see if there's an optimization of central nervous system behaviors. That's not my field either. I wouldn't be the one to do that study, but I'm certainly asking a lot of people to do that study.
Yeah, maybe Malin can do it for you.
Yeah.
We'd probably need like a whole team of neurologists, of people who have been studying that, because that's not going to be a simple study either. But when it comes out, that will be very interesting.
That's interesting, John. I mean, it's obviously working, and it's doing really good for the users. How come? And this is a common question we get. Why isn't this all over the place? Why isn't this in every hospital? Why isn't this bigger? What have you met? What type of resistance or positive response have you met so far regarding OsteoStrong's development?
Well, I've now launched breakthrough products in 2 different industries. So one in medical device, this one, OsteoStrong, and then another one called X3, which is a more fitness focused technology, and both of them are very different approaches to common problems: low bone density and let's call it low muscularity, or someone who wants to engage their muscularity to a higher degree. Fitness. Anytime you come up with a disruptive technology, you're fighting with just about everybody for 2 reasons. One is it's just not the way things have been done, and people are averse to change. So like they see something is different than what they were taught, and they immediately want to argue with it. So they could be doing something that's not optimal. Like we used to reduce people's fevers by putting leeches on them, right?
Yeah.
And it worked. It did reduce the fever.
Does it work? Does it work?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, it works just great. But there's other ways to do that. Now we have acetaminophen, which is much easier to deal with than leeches. So I'm talking, this is hundreds of years ago, but for a long time, when people were looking for alternatives, it was like, why? We have leeches. So in fact, the guy who first theorized that there is such a thing as bacteria, he was a surgeon, and he got thrown out of medicine. They took his license to practice medicine away because people told him, you're saying there's something invisible that is infecting people and causing these infections? Like, that's crazy. Like, you believe in ghosts. That doesn't make any sense. They actually the guy spent his entire career trying to convince surgeons that they needed to wash their hands. So what they would do is they'd work on a patient who had an infection or some type of, systemic sepsis, and they'd get, like pus on their hands, and then they'd go work on someone else. And then that person would die of septic shock. And then the next person would die of septic shock. And then maybe they would cut their own finger with a scalpel and they would die of septic shock. So because they're covered in pus, basically, in infectious material, infected bacteria type environments. So that took a long time. So now that's one point. The second point is there's a whole industry where people are making money that is based on not OsteoStrong. Yeah. So whether it's telling people that they need calcium in their orange juice, because there's calcium reinforced chocolate, literally candy that has calcium in it. Yeah. And of course, sugar is inversely related to bone density growth. So I find that very funny. You have candy and sugar, which damages bone, but then we put calcium in it and say it's good for bone. Yeah. I mean, that's stupid. But there's a whole industry. There's billions of dollars to be made. So that industry is going to do whatever it can to suppress the positive news that comes from OsteoStrong. So whenever you're an industry disruptor, it just takes time. Yeah. You just have to prove it with studies. You have to prove it with testimonials. You have to prove it with more locations and more users that are saying, no, this worked for me.
Yeah. And I mean, now we've been up and running for more than 2 years, and now we have this study going on, but
it took us basically 2 years to convince the doctors at the hospital that this is a good idea to study.
Right. And it should have been obvious.
Yeah.
Because it's based on principles of human physiology that have been understood for over 100 years.
Yeah. So we will go into that study now, I think, in the end. So Malin, please, you've been talking to John about it before, but he's not up to date on the latest. And just tell him about the study and what we want to measure and your view on it, and John can comment on it.
Yeah, okay. So the latest now is that we will make it bigger than the plan from the start. So it will be 125 patients in each group, one OsteoStrong group, and compared to what we call here in Sweden the osteoporotic school, which is some kind of a training with rubber bands and step plates and these things. And we will measure DEXA, of course, but we will also measure 3 bone markers. So markers for formation, resorption, and sclerostin, who will look at the activity of osteocytes. We will look at long blood sugar levels. We will check balance. We will check hardness of the bone by an indentation test in the tibia.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's great.
That's my look at the bone.
Very thorough. I love it.
And we will also do deep interviews, as we said in the beginning, to check the how they feel about the training. We will also do the SF36, looking at quality of life. We will measure pain. So it's going to be a very nice study, and we think there will be several publications from it.
Now it's going to be 120 people in both groups?
Yeah, a total of 250 people.
Oh. Wow.
Yeah.
That's great. Wow, do we need that?
Yeah.
We're super excited.
And it will start in September and go through
Like he's
through
crying
the
now.
winter.
The
Yeah,
doctor's
I
crying.
see he's crying.
Yeah, it's not my allergies. I'm just emotional. I'm very happy about that.
Stop blaming the allergy. We know you're a sensitive guy.
I said it's not my allergies. I'm just very now. I agree with you.
Yeah, so it will be through 9 months, because here in Sweden a lot of people feel that summer is sacred holiday. They go to their summer houses and so on.
I've noted.
We think that it will be difficult to keep them coming during the summer months, so that's why we limit it
Can
to.
you make Swedes do anything in the summertime, or they just do what they want? Right. That's what I thought. That's wonderful.
Get it.
Yeah, so we're very proud about this study, and we work now on the ethical committee application, and then we will start to include patients in the spring, and make a lot of tests. Yeah.
So Malin have weekly meetings. You were there yesterday.
Today, this morning, had an almost 3-hour meeting going through details. So yeah.
Well, yeah, getting a study going, there's an expression we have in America called, that's a pain in the ass, getting a study like that going. And I know how much work you've had to put in to get this approved, to get IRBs to sign off on it. So I'm proud of you. That's awesome. Yeah.
Okay. And I mean, with all this going on, with the potential that this has, and what this study will show, I would like to hear Malin's opinion, and also you, John. Where do you see OsteoStrong in 1 year, in 5 years, and in 10 years from now?
Well, once we get past coronavirus, and I mean the rest of the world who did it wrong, unlike you guys, and people are not, right now, people are so scared of, you know, nothing. Like, yeah. So once we get past that, and people are, you know, wanting to go outside of their home again, we were, before this, on a growth curve that was incredible, like growing faster than some of the fastest growing companies that have ever been seen. So more locations, more countries. I like when a new country comes on, because it's like a whole new team that's working on a whole different medical system, and then when they see what you've done and they see what we've done in the United States, it's very, I mean, that's two countries that are known for doing medical care correctly. So that helps. And so like what Perry's doing in Australia, same kind of process. And so the more of that we have, the faster and faster it's going to grow, and there will be a lot of momentum.
What do you say, Malin?
Yes, I agree. I think 1 year from now, maybe the change will not be very big. And talking about Sweden, here the big change will come after the publication of the study results. So we hope and believe that with this study that we do, this will be an accepted treatment in the social security system, which means that anyone basically could come and train, and it will be a reduced cost, because the state will I don't know how to say that in English. The state will come in and pay part of it, and doctors
reimbursed.
and doctors could just like write a prescription for people to come and work with the skeleton here.
Mm-hmm.
So when we get that, we will have OsteoStrong centers in Sweden, in all small villages, and that will be very beneficial for the Swedish population.
Yes. We're a little bit running over time. I hope you have some more minutes for us, John.
Absolutely.
And all the viewers, I hope you are enjoying this. This is super exciting. If we have a lot of viewers right now that haven't tried OsteoStrong before, they have heard all this, but when you come up to someone that haven't heard about OsteoStrong before, what is it that you tell them? Just why should they go there? What is
Depends
it?
how much time I have, and it depends how much I think they're going to listen.
You have 30 seconds.
Yeah, I say it improves bone health.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you should do it.
Okay, and then they go.
Yeah, I've learned that a lot of people, I mean, as excited about the science as I am and as you guys are, not a lot of people want to hear all the data.
No.
Like when they ask, like, if there are studies on it, I say yes. But I used to go into the detail of the studies, and I could see people walking backwards. You know, they really regretted asking the question. So I won't give somebody the scientific detail unless they ask for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair. That's
Yeah.
fair. We want to add value to our members, and since you are a very well-educated guy in health and you have a strong opinions, it's going to be super interesting to hear your 3 best tips or advices for increasing their health that everybody can do, no matter where you live or whatever, something that people actually can take in and use in their daily life.
Okay, 3. Only 3, right?
Shoot, just go see.
Okay. So the first thing would be is go to OsteoStrong once a week. That's pretty obvious, and it's such a dramatic change in the body. With you only have to go 1 time a week, and it takes like 10 minutes. So, like, why wouldn't you? And that it's like there's a lot of things you can do for your health, but I don't think there's anything that comes close to the small amount of time that OsteoStrong requires and the massive change that happens in the body as a result. So that would be number 1. Number 2, I don't know if I'm going to be well liked after saying this, but you have to have a really protein heavy diet to be the most successful, to regenerate the most cells. When we look at, like, when I developed my fitness product, X3, I really looked at what it takes to grow muscle. Like, it really wasn't common knowledge. Like, we hear all the time, like, people need to eat a balanced diet or a healthy diet, except every nutrition expert has a different definition of what healthy is.
Yeah.
Every nutrition company, which really should be referred to as a anti-nutrition company, typically, there's a lot of companies out there that are selling you what is inexpensive to make and has a lot of addictive properties, and then telling you it's good for you. So these people, they're not doing the right thing.
Is protein, proteins, is that important for your bones as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. Everything you're made of is pretty much water and protein. Also, carbohydrates are not a macronutrient. They do not fit the definition of a macronutrient. So when we talk about macronutrients, there's only 2, fat and protein. The carbohydrates are needed for absolutely nothing. Not brain function, not anything. In fact, people who eat the majority of carbohydrates have a deficit in brain function. High carbohydrate diets make you dumber. So like vegans, vegetarians, they're compromising their brain function. I think veganism and vegetarianism will be seen as an eating disorder like anorexia and bulimia in the next 20 years, because we see so many negative impacts to this style of eating. And it's all based on falsehoods that are promoted by companies who do very biased research, like Nabisco and Kellogg's. They want people to be vegans because they know vegans are not eating vegetables; they're eating cookies and crackers. So it's just a method to find a bunch of people who become willingly addicted to addictive foods that are very inexpensive to make and have a very high margin. The problem with the meat industry is it gets produced for a price and then sold at a price that isn't much different. So very, very low margin in the meat industry. So there's not a lot of research that gets funded from the meat industry, but we need animal protein. We thrive from animal protein. I stopped eating pretty much everything other than animal protein, with rare exception. And I have a book coming out on this subject in 90 days. And
sounds very extreme, John. I think a lot of people listening to this will agree on that. Sounds very extreme. And
it sounds extreme. When you try it, you'll wonder why you haven't been doing it your whole life. Because everything gets better. You drop body fat very quickly. You're stronger. You're like, I probably get a headache maybe once every 2 years, whereas I used to have a headache a week. And it's because of the lack of inflammatories. So, like, if you really want to look at an anti-inflammatory diet, which, by the way, cancer is linked to inflammation, all types of cancer.
Yeah.
And what is chronic cellular inflammation? Sugar and oxalates, and there is no plant that does not have oxalates in it. So, yeah, I mean, is it extreme? Right now, the Western diet is 70% plant-based and 30% meat-based. I would encourage people just to flip that around. Get 70% of your nutrition from animal protein, and you can still have some. Not everybody has the same goals as I do. I want to be as strong as possible, as lean as possible. By the way, those are the two biggest drivers of long life: being strong and being lean. Yeah. Like those are the only two factors that have been looked at in nutrition health that are inarguable.
So that is also something you really can share here, that try to keep muscles on your body as you grow older and not put on too much fat. That would be a very healthy way of
strong, being lean, and the nutrition that you will ultimately come to with a greater understanding of what it takes to be strong and what it takes to be lean is a very heavy animal protein type diet. I eat about 3 pounds of meat a day. On the days that I eat. Now, I also do intermittent fasting. And
1.5 kilo is that 1.5 kilo of meat.
That's like 1.7 kilos of meat a day.
Okay.
Yeah, and I eat that in one meal also, which is great. You guys have watched me do this.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Every time. John, amazing. So OsteoStrong, protein diet, skip the carbohydrates, and try to put muscles on your body, and that will increase your quality of life physically.
Yeah.
I mean, you've been very much right about OsteoStrong and X3 bars, so we'll see how the public will go with this one on the meat thing. That's going to be interesting to follow. And I
think it will pick up traction the more studies there are. Harvard's doing a study right now, and Dr. Sean Baker, anybody who follows him, he's the biggest proponent of this, and he's written the most popular book on the subject. And he's had some of the look at the preliminary data, and we know where it's going. Everyone's getting healthier and addressing their chronic disease by going to this meat-based.
Okay. Thank you, John. Robert, have you had any common questions for John from the viewers today?
I think one interesting question is about the effect on the immune system, about strengthening your bones. So maybe we talk a lot about the study and the benefits. So I know in the US you have looked at the immune system benefits. Is there anything you can comment on this?
Well, what we know about like metabolic dysfunction, and you're testing for this in the next study, and we tested for this in London when those studies were done. When that was the study with Basil, when he was taking the psychological measures. Also, we looked at hemoglobin A1C, and so the hemoglobin A1C measures were absolutely outstanding. And as a monotherapy, OsteoStrong is the most powerful ever measured. So monotherapy meaning just done in isolation. So no metformin drug, no other drug, no cardiovascular exercise. Because somebody with metabolic dysfunction, you'd be told you had metabolic dysfunction, your physician would tell you to do all of the things: caloric restriction, cardiovascular exercise, weight training, and OsteoStrong. So these things are very stackable, but as a monotherapy, we see that the greatest effect on metabolic function of cells in the human body is OsteoStrong. So like, let's use coronavirus as an example because everybody's reading about it now.
Yeah.
So when you look at the people who are worse off and have what are called comorbidities, so they have other dysfunctions that contribute to a higher likelihood of death or seriousness of the dysfunction, the seriousness of the virus, it's metabolic function or dysfunction. So what OsteoStrong does is improves metabolic function to the highest degree. Therefore, when it comes to like viruses, we have a greater ability to combat the viruses when we have greater metabolic function. So yeah, so that is a huge determining factor in those who use OsteoStrong are going to be better off.
Interesting. Any comments on that, Molly?
No, I just agree that everything you can do would boost your immune system would help you in the corona and the fight for the virus.
Yeah.
There's been a few questions about your mom. She's popular. They're asking one question regarding her, but also that applies to everyone. So when she got her bone density back, is she still doing OsteoStrong now?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and is that something you should do for the rest of your life, or can you do it in different stages of your life?
Great question. Unlike, I think one of the most attractive things about OsteoStrong is, well, let me back up. Like when people ask me questions about strength training, X3, my strength product. By the way, there is a Scandinavian distributor for X3, Viking X3 bar, if you want to look for that group on Instagram. But like with X3, I tell people when they ask, how long do I have to do this? And I say, well, it's a very aggressive and effective type of strength training, but detraining, as I mentioned earlier, begins after 10 days. So 10 days of not strength training, you start to lose muscle. So this is a for life thing. You got to do it forever. A lot of people don't like the idea of doing something forever.
No, we want a quick
fix. Well, I mean, ultimately, people would like to just take a pill and not think about it and then have the problem solved. That's just not how the body works. But what you can do is you can do OsteoStrong for a year or maybe 2, build your bone density very high, and then look at where you might be in 30 years. So if you're 80 years old and you build your bone density up high to have the bones of a 30-year-old, are you really worried about what's going to happen in the next 30 years? after 30 years pass? Probably not.
Yeah.
So you can address your bone density dysfunction and get a very high level of bone, and then you might not need to worry about it again.
Yeah. And of course, the level of increases, potential increases of bone will always be individual. So for some people, they can get very optimized results after 12, 24 months. We have seen that here, and for some members it goes slower. Do you have any comments on that? Why it differs, and why some get very, very high numbers on the DEXAs and others a little bit lower?
Well, there are a number of things that can negatively impact bone that people expose themselves to all the time. You can have poor thyroid function and not know it, poor parathyroid function and not know it. So OsteoStrong is good for finding those problems, because if somebody's doing all the right things and they're not growing very much bone, there's a problem. And the first question is get your thyroid and parathyroid checked. There's other things that...
Tireoidhormon, sköldkörtelfunktion.
Okay, tack. Sorry, John.
Okay, I'm glad you guys took care of that. So but then there's other things in nutrition, like somebody who's a vegan or a vegetarian, they're damaging their bone. There are 20 different studies right now that show that vegan and vegetarian nutrition damage bone and you lose bone density much faster. So a lot of people are still under the false impression that eating a lot of vegetables is good for you. So they go and they have tons of vegetable nutrition, and they don't know that it's really not nutrition at all. And so they end up damaging bone density as a result of it. So they might be doing OsteoStrong, but they lack the building blocks to address the bone density. So the calcium in vegetables is mostly unusable by the body. And the protein in vegetables is mostly unusable by the body. Only about 9 to 7% of the protein that is in vegetables is able to be utilized by the body. So when you think you're getting 100 grams of protein, you really might only be getting like 10 grams of usable protein, which is not meaningful to the body, and it means you're in a state of atrophy. You know, you're losing bone, you're losing muscle, you're losing tendons, you're losing ligaments. Yeah. So that's another one. I don't know.
John, I just want to hear Malin's response on this diet view that John has that's very extreme.
Yeah.
Is this what you have been taught and you live by today?
No.
No?
No, it's not. So when it comes to nutrition, I still have the old kind of view and what it's taught in Sweden, that you should eat a variety of food, both vegetables and meat, of course, and that's what we believe is the good thing. And also here in Sweden, and probably also in America, a lot of media is publishing, especially athletes. So how do you say that? This cross country skiing stars, for instance, they go over and they eat only vegetarian food. And swimming stars, they also they leave the meat behind and then go for a vegetarian.
There's a few that are doing that.
Sorry?
There's a few of them that are doing that.
Yeah, yes. So and here in Sweden, that's what the newspapers write about, that it's good for them and they can have a longer career if they leave the meat behind and continue with only vegetarian diet.
Yeah, and this is also my education. So this is, I'm super excited to see where this is going. I have really high trust and believe in what you do, John. So I'm gonna follow this and be critical in my way and see where it turns up on this.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting.
It is, and you really are an interesting person, John. You've been adding so much value to our members, our listeners, and especially I can talk for myself and Malin as well. It's very inspiring, and thank you for inventing this machine. I mean, I can come to work every day and help people through your machines, and that is a beautiful thing you have created right there. You should be super proud of yourself.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate all you guys are doing to educate Sweden. I know, day one, it's not easy because nobody's heard of it, and everyone's skeptical, and it takes time. It takes time to build up a user base big enough to show results. And another thing, every country does this. They want to see results in their own population.
Yeah.
Like, when I went to Iceland, they wanted to see what would happen to Icelandic people. They didn't want to hear about what happened to British people.
Yeah.
Like there's a big difference between Icelandic people and British people.
No.
Okay.
But it's a beautiful thing now. We have around almost 1,000 active members in Sweden coming in every week that is happy and satisfied, and I think that is a proof itself, bigger than any study. So we're super excited and happy, and it's just the beginning.
Yes.
Robert, do you have anything more?
We're having a lot of people saying thank you to John for joining, and congratulations on the study. So people are excited about the same things we're excited about. So cool. I think it's been a great show. Yeah, we have been having listeners from all over the world, from Australia, Greece, US, Nordic countries. So this has been a beautiful 1.5 hour.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do you want to have any last words, John, before you leave us this time?
Let me think if there's anything else controversial I can say. That's about it.
I've never seen you speechless before.
Well, yeah, I could go on. I could take another hour if you guys want me to. This kind of thing is my favorite subject. I really enjoy talking about the success stories of OsteoStrong. Whether it's the physiological changes or the general happiness in people's lives. I really like walking into a building, an OsteoStrong location in a country that I don't go to very often, with nobody I know, and having people walk up to me and saying, like, you changed my life, or I think my mother was, probably not going to be around much longer, but now she feels that she's going to live 10 years longer because she discovered OsteoStrong.
Yeah.
That feels great. And I know you guys get those same stories all the time. So, like, the fact that I could help my mother was obviously very motivating to me. My mother's amazing. So, I'm happy I could do what I did for her. But then getting to share that with, like, the world, that's pretty cool. That's great. And it makes me feel fantastic every day.
Yeah, we're super proud of helping you with that, really.
Awesome. Well, thank you. You guys are putting in the work in Sweden. Yeah.
So what's the rest of the day, Karis? What
you got me up pretty early.
Yeah, you have the full day now.
Yeah. Thank you. So let's see. I'm gonna do my X3 workout at about noon, and then I'm gonna eat a couple pounds of meat.
That's it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have some work to do. We did a photo shoot recently, and I have to decide which photos are like the right ones, and we have a marketing meeting, and I feel like I have a meeting this evening.
You should probably look that up.
Well, Chelsea needs to. She's in charge of my schedule. By the way, when you want to get my attention, like everybody in Sweden, you guys need to stop sending messages to my Facebook account and start sending emails to Chelsea, because she's in charge of my schedule. Yeah, because like I had no Zoom link, and of course it was in my personal Facebook message box, and I was like, it's a good thing I looked.
Here you are.
Yeah, it worked, but a lot of things get by me. That's not a box I check.
Okay.
I only look at it for you.
Thank you.
Specifically you, Jonas.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, your success with both products, like you've totally transformed. You were a really skinny guy when I met you, and now you're a really muscular guy.
Thank you.
It's pretty cool. Yeah. Yeah. Now Robert needs to catch up. He's clearly not as dedicated as you are. But you know, he has a better haircut than you. Keep that in mind.
Okay. I think we're done for today.
Yeah.
Okay. I will let you go.
Enjoy your day.
Hopefully you can join us
guys.
last time in this podcast.
Absolutely. Yeah. When the book comes out.
Yeah.
The book is like every chapter is going to be controversial. Like there'll be a chapter on hormones, nutrition, different activities you can do, why cardiovascular exercise is a waste of time, and gives you the opposite of what you think you're getting. That like everything in the book. But the book, the foreword was written by Forrest Griffin, former light heavyweight champion of the world. I got an endorsement from the head strength coach of the Miami Heat, because they've completely switched away from weights now, and you know they're just using X3 now. Also, I got a really positive comment from a NASA researcher. There's a whole bunch of really great endorsements and different media personalities that have just become really excited about all the controversial stuff that I'm, working on.
Congratulations. I will definitely read it, and I will make sure we have a copy in our centers for our members to look at.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, everybody's going to enjoy it.
Love it. Okay, John, thank you so much.
Okay. Great. Awesome. All right. Have a good day. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.